Imagine a world where the United Nations Human Rights Chief comments on your country's upcoming elections. How would you react? Now picture this scenario playing out in India, a democratic powerhouse. The UN chief recently stirred up a tempest, voicing concerns about India's 2024 Lok Sabha elections. This has sparked an outcry, with India rejecting these statements, calling them unmerited and unwarranted. A controversy is now brewing, inviting global attention. Let's delve deeper into the heart of this international conundrum. The UN Human Rights Chief didn't mince words when discussing India's upcoming elections. The chief expressed significant concerns about the fairness and transparency of the world's biggest democratic process. And with India's 2024 Lok Sabha elections in sight, these comments have certainly sparked a global conversation. The chief's remarks revolve around a fear of potential human rights violations, with a focus on the rights of voters to freely express their political will. They highlighted the need for a democratic environment where voters can make informed choices without fear or coercion, but that's not all. The chief also mentioned the importance of unbiased and impartial media coverage, hinting at the potential for media manipulation in the electoral process. But the question arises, why India? It's not the first time the country has been under the UN chief's microscope. There have been previous instances where the chief vocalized concerns about human rights issues in India, notably in relation to the contentious region of Kashmir. Remember, India isn't just any country, it's the world's largest democracy, and its elections are a global event. With over half of the world's population expected to vote in the upcoming elections, the UN chief's comments aren't just about India. They have implications for the world. Now the UN chief's comments have been made, and they have certainly stirred the pot. But how has India reacted to these statements? Now, let's hear what India has to say in response. India didn't take these comments lightly. As the world's largest democracy, India prides itself on upholding the values of freedom, transparency, and fairness in its election processes. The UN chief's remarks, therefore, sparked a robust response from the subcontinent. Indian authorities were quick to reject the comments, calling them unwarranted and interference in internal matters. They emphasized that the country's electoral system has always been, and continues to be, a beacon of democracy. They expressed their firm belief in the sanctity of their electoral process, and their commitment to upholding it, irrespective of external commentary. The Indian government also pointed out the UN chief's selective criticism, questioning the chief's silence on issues in other countries. They argued that the UN's focus should be on fostering global peace and harmony, rather than meddling in the internal affairs of sovereign nations. This reaction from India underscores a broader narrative of national sovereignty and the need for international bodies to respect it. It's a stance that has been echoed by other nations in similar situations, creating a global discourse on the balance between international oversight and national autonomy. This isn't the first time the UN chief has criticized India. Let's look back. The UN chief has a history of critical remarks towards India. That's no secret. One notable instance that springs to mind is the UN chief's comments on the long-standing issue of Kashmir. The UN chief expressed concern over alleged human rights violations and urged both India and Pakistan to exercise restraint. This didn't sit well with India, which maintains that Kashmir is an internal issue and outside interference is unwelcome. The UN chief's comments, however, echoed across international forums, sparking debates and discussions about India's handling of the Kashmir situation. In other instances as well, the UN chief has been vocal about perceived shortcomings in India's approach to human rights and democratic processes. These past criticisms serve as a backdrop to the UN chief's recent remarks about the upcoming Lok Sabha elections. The question that arises now is, but why does the UN chief's opinion matter on a global scale? India's elections are a global event. Indeed they are. The world's largest democracy is going to the polls in 2024, a political spectacle watched by billions. But the stakes are far more significant than just spectatorship. With over 50% of the world's population expected to cast their votes, the outcome of India's elections has the potential to reshape the global political landscape. The ripple effects of this democratic exercise will undeniably be felt far beyond India's borders. The UN chief's comments on these elections are therefore not just about India, they're about the state of democracy worldwide, about human rights, about international relations, and about how we, as a global community, respect and uphold these values. It's about setting precedents and standards for what's acceptable in a democratic process. However, India isn't the only country under the UN chief's scrutiny. The UN chief's comments don't stop at India. Indeed, this global figurehead has been known to share his perspectives on a variety of nations, each with its own unique political landscape. Let's take a brief tour around the world, shall we? Over in Eastern Europe, Hungary has found itself under the UN chief's scrutiny. His concerns have often centered around democratic freedoms, human rights, and governmental controls. Then we move to the Middle East, where Iran's human rights record frequently becomes a talking point. The UN chief's emphasis on freedom of speech, assembly, and other civil liberties has been a recurring theme in his commentary on Iran. Meanwhile, Russia's actions, both domestically and on the international stage, have not escaped his attention. From concerns over press freedom to the treatment of political dissidents, his remarks have sparked intense discussions. We then journey to Africa, where Senegal's human rights track record has been a topic of concern, particularly regarding freedom of assembly and gender equality. These comments are not made in a vacuum. Each country's response, like India's, can influence international relations, creating ripples that can be felt across the globe. The UN chief's words can spark dialogue, encourage change, or ignite controversy. They can also shape the way nations perceive one another, affecting diplomatic ties and alliances. The UN chief's words carry weight, but what are the key insights we can draw from them? Let's delve deeper in the next segment. The UN chief's comments are more than just words. By questioning the election process in India, one of the world's largest democracies, the UN chief has stirred a global conversation. And it's not just about the upcoming 2024 elections. It's about the role of international bodies in national affairs, the universality of human rights, and the delicate balance of power in a diverse, interconnected world. These comments are not isolated. They are part of a larger narrative that scrutinizes the democratic processes of countries around the globe. The chief's remarks were not made in a vacuum. They reflect a wider concern about the state of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law worldwide. The timing of the comments, right before the Indian elections, raises questions about their appropriateness. It's a critical moment when the world's attention is focused on India. The remarks, seen as interference by some, could influence the electoral process, either directly or indirectly. The potential influence of these comments on the electoral process is significant. They could sway public opinion, spark debates, and even impact the results. They could also influence the way other countries perceive India, potentially affecting its international relations. The UN chief's comments on India's 2024 elections have opened a Pandora's box of debates and discussions. They have ignited a discourse that transcends borders, stirring conversations about democracy, human rights, and international relations. How has the world reacted to these comments? The world is divided over the UN chief's comments. This division is seen in the myriad of reactions to the UN human rights chief's remarks about India's upcoming elections. Some voices echo the chief's concerns, citing the importance of free and fair elections in the world's largest democracy. They argue that the chief's role is to highlight potential issues in human rights and democratic processes, regardless of the timing. On the flip side, others stand with India, viewing the comments as intrusive and inappropriate before an election. They argue that the chief's remarks may create unnecessary tension and could potentially influence the electoral process. This camp includes those who believe that the UN human rights chief should focus on more pressing issues in countries with a history of human rights violations. The conversation also extends to earlier comments made by the chief regarding other nations, such as Hungary, Iran, Russia, and Senegal. This has sparked debates on the role of the UN human rights chief and whether they should be commenting on internal affairs of sovereign nations. As we delve into these differing perspectives, it's clear that this discourse is not just about India's 2024 elections. It's a conversation about the role of international institutions in upholding human rights and democracy, and how nations react to these interventions. It's time to wrap up what we've learned. The UN chief's comments have sparked a global debate. We've explored the chief's remarks, which cast a critical eye on India's upcoming Lok Sabha elections. We've delved into India's response, a staunch rejection of these comments, and we've considered the wider international context by examining the chief's past criticisms of countries like Hungary, Iran, Russia, and Senegal. The global importance of India's elections cannot be overstated, with over half of the world's population projected to vote. We've analyzed the potential implications of the chief's comments, questioning their appropriateness on the eve of an election, and the role of the UN human rights chief in such matters. We've also discussed varying perspectives on these remarks and the subsequent reactions. This discourse has sparked an international conversation on human rights, electoral integrity, and international relations. What do you think about the UN chief's comments and their impact on India's elections? Share your thoughts in the comments below.